Hello everyone, and welcome back to Alaska Rural Homestead. I am Michelle, and I tell you what, today I'm really super excited. It is 20 degrees out today and it's so beautiful. I really wish you could see it. I guess I'm getting spring fever, even though it seems like spring is still a long ways away. But today we're going to be doing a super easy recipe. It's my potato sourdough starter. We grow a lot of our own potatoes here on this homestead, and today I'm going to be sharing a recipe that you are just going to love, and hopefully you grow a lot of potatoes on your homestead and you can make your own potato sourdough starter too. I think our favoriteest potatoes are the Yukon Golds and the Butterballs. But, you know, sourdough starter does not have to be hard. It's not difficult, you know, because back in the day when the settlers and pioneers were here, they really didn't have access to all the eggs and milk and leavening agents like we do. We have it super easy. And the pioneers and settlers, you know, they had to learn to grow their own grain and provide their own leavening agents, and they soon learned by adding grain and water and a little bit of flour that created a yeast. And they were able to make a sourdough starter that they put into a little ball, put it into a flour sack, and they were able to carry it from camp to camp as they were in search of gold or that better life. Let's get started. Okay, so for this recipe, you're going to need 3 to 4 medium-sized potatoes. Now, you can either leave the skins on if you have organic potatoes, but if they're not organic, I would suggest that you go ahead and peel them like we are going to do today. Anytime you are dealing with a sourdough starter, make sure that when you are stirring it, that you always use either a wooden spoon or something like a non-stick little rubber spoon or something like that to stir it, because metal will react to the sourdough starter. this sourdough starter we're going to be able to use in 3 days. Now you can tell when your sourdough starter is ready as the bubbles start dying off, or it doesn't make as many bubbles as it used to, and it gives off a sourdough smell. Now you do want to keep your sourdough as it is making the gases and forming the carbon dioxides and producing its own yeast. You want to make sure that you are keeping it in a temperature anywhere above 65 but below 95, because if you get it too hot, you will kill some of the good yeast that it is forming in the potato sourdough starter. And before I put this video out, I am going to show you what day 2, day 3 looks like before I put this video out, so you can see exactly how it should be acting. Okay, so we've got our potatoes peeled, and I'm going to go ahead and just cut these down and rinse them. Alright, so I have about maybe 3-4 cups of water in here, and I'm just going to cut these down, and you just want enough water to cover your potatoes. Now we're going to go ahead and get this on the stove. Alright, so we got our potatoes on the stove, and I'm going to let those soften up, and it's going to be about 30 to 45 minutes, and we will check them to make sure they're done, and then we'll go from there. Okay guys, our potatoes are done boiling, and they're cooked real well. So now I'm just going to stick these outside and let them cool, and we'll be right back. Okay guys, so we're back and our potatoes are completely cooled. Now I'm going to start mashing them really well. I'm just going to mash these down really good. Now, if you don't have a nice, good masher like this, you can always throw this in the blender also. Now I'm going to go ahead and use this masher. And just remember, the richer your sourdough starter is, or your potatoes here, the more flavor and texture that you're going to have in your bread. Now that we have it really mashed well and a really nice consistency here, we're going to start adding our flour and the little bit of sugar that we're going to be putting in here. Now with your flour, I just have regular unbleached flour. but you could certainly use wheat or rye. But I know there is a little bit of shortage going on food and grains and whatnot. So if you can't find rye or wheat flour, you could certainly just use unbleached, cheap flour. We're simply going to add 2 cups of flour to this mixture. Now we're going to add, we're also going to add a tablespoon and a half of sugar. This is just regular sugar that I have. And we're going to go ahead and get this mixed up really well, and then we're going to add it to a glass container. You never want to put it in a metal container or anything like that. Always, preferably a glass container. And make sure that where you store your sourdough is away from drafts, and make sure that you do not have that lid on tight or anything like that. Okay, so you see it's a really thick consistency. Well, I'm just going to add a little bit more water. Okay, this is just regular tap water. Now, you can't, if you don't have clean water, make sure you use distilled water or something like that. But we have really fresh, clean tap water, so I'm not really worried about it interacting with the sourdough. So I'm just going to add a little bit of that. All right, so it's still nice and thick, and that's what we want. It's got a nice texture to it. Now we're going to put it in our glass jar here. Now, a little something about the sourdough. It is going to start converting the starch into sugar, and it is going to start creating its own natural yeast and feeding off the yeast in the air to break down the starch into sugars that will feed the yeast, and it will start forming lactic acid, which will be fermenting the sourdough starter. And you could see a little, is what they call it, is they call it a little hooch on top of your sourdough. It could be yellowish, it could be more brownish, depending on what type of flour that you use. So don't be alarmed. You are just going to mix that in, stir your sourdough at least once a day, keep it away from drafts. go ahead and get this on the stove now that we got it made, and it's going to start doing its magic. And we'll check back tomorrow, and then we'll check back on the third day. Okay guys, here is my sourdough starter. I will show you. I got to move the eggs here. These are my eggshells, by the way, that I put on the stove, and it will dry them and cook all the bacteria off. And there is my sourdough starter. And I keep it on here, and it does just fine. All right, day 2 of the potato sourdough starter. Just gonna get this mixed up a little bit. All right, here is the third day of your starter. So we're back on the third day of our sourdough starter, and it is ready to go. It looks good, it smells good. Now, if you want to go ahead and use it, you could, or you could keep it on the counter for just a few more days, depending on how much of a sourdough taste you like. Or you could go ahead and reserve a half a cup and put it in the fridge, and put a lid on it and put it in the fridge. Just remember, when you go to use your sourdough starter, make sure it's room temperature before you go ahead and use it. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video and it was informative for you. And don't forget to subscribe and like our channel, and stay tuned for potato sourdough French bread. Bye now.